Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, Laura shares her path from Eastern Europe to a top target uni in London. We learn how she broke into investment banking, how she survived with ADHD, and eventually how she broke into one of the top growth equity teams at a Megafund. Enjoy. Okay, Laura, welcome to the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Hi.
So it would be awesome if you could give the listeners a short summary of your bio.
Sure. I work at a large private equity fund in Europe, but I am in the growth equity team. We can get into that later. Prior to that, I did technology investment banking at a European bank. And prior to that, I was in college.
Awesome. So back in college, did you know investment banking was your calling in private equity?
Of course, I've known ever since I was born, of course.
It looks like you were an accounting major, and
yeah,
so
just a straight line.
You have family in it or anything, or who taught you, who told you about it, or anything, or nothing?
It's a funny story because actually I grew up in Eastern Europe and I always wanted to study in the US. So I applied to US colleges and I wanted to do econ because I loved econ in high school. And it turned out to be too expensive. So when it came to actually me going, we realized, right, it's just not going to happen. And I hadn't applied to anywhere in Europe. So, everybody was going off to college and I was like, well, great. So I literally have nowhere to go. And I basically moved to the UK and I worked at KPMG for a year. They were offering like a gap year intern sort of scheme at the time, and I was in the advisory department, and that's when I kind of started learning a little bit more about finance, and I thought, well, this is really good to know, but this is not what I want to ultimately do, but this is like a really great skill set, and that's kind of why I went on to study that at university.
So when that 1 year program at KPMG, it was kind of like a transaction services, like almost like a transaction advisory, what you'd call in the US type of thing?
Exactly. And I mean, yes, that's exactly right. Yeah.
And so did you use that to save up for university? Because the school you went to, I'm not going to say it's pretty expensive too.
It is expensive. I actually couldn't save up because, I was in London and London is extremely expensive, obviously. And all the other gap year interns were from London. So they lived at home. They saved up all the money. I actually used it for, food and rent. So I was like basically broke even. Yeah. But it was really good because it was, I do recommend to the extent that anybody can, and doesn't need to be year-long, it could be summer internship, even if they don't pay you, but it was just like a really good insight into, the corporate life, I guess. And I do think it helped me.
I'm surprised that's right out of high school. You don't even need a degree for that. They let you say, hey, come. Yeah. You're 18 or 19 and you're
I was 18. There were like 6 of us that they took on. So it was pretty unique. And I do think it was a really good experience. I was officially in transaction services, so advisory, but I did a couple of months in restructuring because I was a huge broker that went bust in the UK. So we had to work on that. And then I did around a month in corporate finance. So that's kind of the closest to, investment banking that you could get.
And so when you were doing that, does that still happen today? Does that program still exist? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but honestly, if it was me, I would, if I was in high school and if I wanted to do something like that, I'd just like email all of them and ask if they're up for it. It may not be paid, obviously, in that case, but even if it doesn't structurally exist,
yeah.
If you're down for an unpaid internship, like, everybody likes free labor. Because before then, I was really working the Big Four, but I also spent a few months at Deloitte in my home country, and that was unpaid. It was extremely boring because obviously that was a really small local office, but yeah, it's easy to get these things if you don't expect a salary.
Yeah, and then I'm surprised even at like a KPMG, they would take on, I mean, they did pay you. Do you remember what they paid you? Like what it was?
Yeah, they paid, I mean, it was nowhere near. It was
Well, yeah,
probably, I
you have a
want to
high
say,
school, you have a high school degree and that's it. So
yeah, it was probably 50, around 50% of what the new grads would get.
okay, so I don't know, enough to barely pay rent, barely pay
Yeah,
rent.
it was around, it's fine, I can say it was around, I want to say 20,000 US dollars a year before
20K.
tax,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah. So it's like you're really tight living in London. So you had roommates or you're like just renting a tiny
Yeah,
room.
I was renting a room actually in like this
Yeah.
house of this landlady. Oh, yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like really far from central London. Oh God.
Yeah, you probably had to commute in, right? So okay, so you
Yeah, I did.
survived that year. It kind of exposed you to finance, and then what made you say, okay, well, I'm gonna? Did you take out loans for school, or did something happen where the financial situation changed? Or
So for school in the UK, if you're from Europe, if you're from the EU, which now I don't know how that would work,
now it might
but
not exist, yeah, but okay,
the EU, the UK was obviously in the EU, and if you are from the EU, then you could take almost an interest-free loan from the UK government. I repaid it like really quickly.
mm-hmm.
And it's like if you never earn more than a certain amount of money, and that bar is really low, it's something like if you never earn more than 20K, then you never have to repay it. Obviously, most people who go to uni do get paid that or more. So that was really easy, and then my parents luckily could support me with living expenses.
And then what was that? How much debt did you take out? Was it like 50K?
Oh, for the tuition. So the tuition was unfortunately £9,000 a year because it used to be 3,000, but then they switched like the year I started uni.
Nine sounds really low to me.
It's compared to the US, of course.
Compared, yeah.
Really, yeah. So it's really 20, and it's 3 years, not 4. So it's £27,000 of tuition of debt, which is nothing compared to the 200K plus that people.
Yeah. Sometimes you hear that in the US. So, okay. So you're going through your first year immediately, hey, did you think investment banking right away? Or were you thinking, hey, go back to the big four, do accounting, audit? What was your thought process?
I knew that. So the reason why the gap year internship actually existed is because it's precisely that's why, they tried to get people to come back as grads. And I knew that I did not want to do that because, the last month of that internship I spent in corporate finance, and that's what I liked the most. But I soon learned that the corporate finance teams within Big Four are gonna go after these little, small, medium-sized enterprises in the UK. I'm exaggerating, but these are not going to be big, sexy deals. And I was like, well, if I do this, may as well do it properly. And so I was one of those very sad, pathetic students who are very, very keen. I think this is to do with me growing up in Europe, where people start, going out and partying really early, like before high school, basically. Yeah. And so I felt like I had kind of done that. So when I joined,
you were a mature 19-year-old.
Right. I was ready to go. I was like ready to climb the ladder. And so in my first year, I was like really, really focused, and I don't necessarily. I think there really needs to be a balance, because I do think I could have had a lot more fun, and it's really, really important. I went to a college which was extremely finance focused, on campus. Like, I don't know, 70% of people probably want to do investment banking, and I don't think it's necessarily the healthiest environment. I think it's really good to explore. But anyway, I was very focused, and again, I went to a target university, and what that meant was that, recruiters were all over campus, and I went to all the, Morgan Stanley coffee chat, Starbucks join us, Goldman Sachs, coffee and cake Thursday evenings or something. I went to all of these, and the bank where I ended up working at, I connected really well to a couple of them. A couple of the women in the team, and they were offering spring weeks in the UK, it was called. It was just a week of kind of like a shadow type, it's not really work experience because you're not working. It's just 1 week. And I landed 2 of those, and it was, it was so competitive, like crazy. And everybody wanted to get like spring weeks, and like the biggest overachievers had like 5 spring weeks. kind of crazy. And that's also right before exams.
You put spring
So,
weeks on your resume?
oh,
Like,
yeah.
you're like,
I don't think I have mine still. I mean, I hope I don't, because it's
yeah.
like bad at this point. But I had like so many spring weeks, and like I really felt like I was crushing it. And like you knew that you were doing very well if you had your spring weeks secured like really early. So the term starts in October, and the spring weeks are in spring, obviously. I feel like come December, before the new year, I had my spring weeks secured. So you were basically the go-to stuff.
So you said 2 or 3 kind of set up?
2, yeah.
You had 2. And then, so when do they actually happen? Like February, March?
So those were actually, no, they were in April, I think.
In April. Okay. So I've had enough guests from London where I think I understand. So then that turns into an actual internship over the summer sometimes.
Next year. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The following,
the following year.
Yeah, the following year. So it's super early. It's like, it's a way for them to get like in front of sophomores or freshmen even.
Yes. And it's also, I mean, obviously from a security perspective, it's amazing, because that first summer, I did my exams and I could chill the whole summer. I went and traveled, and I mean, I did internships actually, because that's the sort of person I was.
Yeah.
But I could actually have fun and not be stressed out.
Yeah.
And then you enter second year knowing that you've already got an internship. And some people prefer to kind of look for other things. So there were some that secured banking internships, but they, wanted to try out consulting.
Yeah.
I wasn't one of them. I thought, what, I worked hard for this. I'm just going to focus on other things at this point.
What do you mean other things, like just enjoying
like studying, extracurriculars, hobbies?
Yeah. Do you think that hurts at all for full-time recruiting? Like once you get your spring week, if that first summer when you don't have to do anything really, do you think you should take advantage of it, knowing and looking back? I know what I would say, but
if you have something secured, you just enjoy. I think I think I'm the sort of person who I would never advise, like, just YOLO, whatever, just like explore, it doesn't matter, you can always get something, which is true, but we also live in the real world and you want to get a job.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, so I think you have to be focused and try and secure things and do it at the right time, because if you are focused at the right time, like I was, you can later reap the benefits, and that's what I'd recommend. And then you can have fun, absolutely, and you can explore whatever you want. I actually went to the Middle East and I worked at an NGO. So that was just something that I liked for me, not because I necessarily want to work in that field.
Very cool. So you kind of are coming up, you do your spring weeks, you get to the summer, you travel a little bit, you do kind of that NGO thing, you come back to school, you still know you have that internship at that. So it's like that whole year, you're just focusing on grades, having a good time, like making sure
you can basically do whatever you want. Because in the UK, and this is a double-edged sword, it doesn't work well for people like me. I actually do need structure, but there's almost no structure. There's no assignments, there's no midterms, there's
the final.
That's 100% of your grade. So it didn't work well for my mental health, but that's what it effectively is. But you have complete freedom, so you can do a lot of things with your time.
That's cool. And so as you're approaching that summer, so where you ended up summering, is that where you ended up going full time?
Yeah.
The bulge bracket. Okay. So you're kind of like approaching that summer. What did they tell you? What was the communication like? Was it like, hey, we're going to put you in this group, or you didn't know until you showed up?
So my springing was done in TMT, Tech Media Telecoms. That's where I wanted to be. That's where I did my summer internship. That was just it was done. They hired for those teams.
Got it.
And because for me, I really love the people that were in the team. And that's what I would always recommend to people. You want the brand name, yes, and you want it to be what you want to do, right? Like if you don't want to do trading, don't do trading. But you ultimately choose the people versus the company. So I really, really like the people. Bigger issue was that when I actually joined as a grad, most of them had left, but that's another story. So I really liked the team, and that's when I started. And in terms of communications, they basically said, I think there were 3 of us in the team interning, and they said, if you all do well, you can all get the offers.
Got it. Okay. So that's kind of nice, because you're not necessarily it doesn't feel as competitive. It's almost like you're helping each other. And this was at a time a little bit where stuff had kind of slowed down and the economy was picking back up, I feel like, but it wasn't like, oh no, at that point it was pretty good. So then what happened kind of when you started the internship? How was it, once you actually arrived at the office and you had the three people, luckily it wasn't as competitive, but since they said you could all get offers, but what was it like when you already met the team and everything, but was it like immediately long hours? Was it like a ramp up period, a training period? What was that like?
I was actually my buddy. We all got assigned buddies, and it wasn't necessarily the case that the buddy had to give you work, but it oftentimes happens. So, because you're with them, they have something to do. Their job is to make sure you integrate, help you with any admin, etc. My buddy was amazing, amazing, amazing. She was really, really supportive of women in the workplace and just of young people. She was really, really awesome, and kind of like she was doing extremely well. And, despite, she was someone who had a really, really good grasp of kind of work-life balance, obviously long hours, but she was just a great role model in general. And so I was paired with her, and she was on a really big deal. And so I, from day one, she kind of put me on it to help her out. So for me, it was actually long hours from the get-go, which was hard, but, I'm a night owl. I actually don't really mind late hours. I mind early mornings. But it was okay. I knew it's easy when you have an expiration date, right? It's really different when you're a grad. But here I knew I want to say it was around 10 weeks. So it didn't bother me, and I was expecting it.
Yeah. So you were going to bed at like 2, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning sometimes, and then back in the office around 10 in the morning.
You're back in the office around 10. And, I think it's just, as an intern, you don't know how to do anything. Everything's so new, but you're really off.
Did you expected those hours, but how did it feel to actually do it? Was it like harder than you expected?
No, because I think because of my high school experience, so I did the international baccalaureate in my home country, but there was only one school in the country at the time that offered it. And I also had to do the national diploma. So I did 2 high school programs at a time. So I had extreme amount of workload, and I did a lot of extracurriculars. And then in college, it was, during the year, first and second years, like I was really bad, actually. I focused on career. I focused on the spring weeks. I focused on a lot of my extracurriculars. And when exams came, 2 months before exams started, that was crunch time, because that's 100% of your, grade. So I'd be in the library, until 1, 2, 3 a.m. So I feel like I've always done this in chunks throughout my life. So it actually didn't shock me.
Okay, that's good. I think for me, it was harder when I started full time. I was like, I guess full time's harder, right?
Yeah, full time's really hard.
Yeah. Harder. So you're kind of getting through the internship. You're doing well. You're working with this. It sounds like a great mentor, and she's kind of pulling you along, giving you the ropes. You're probably getting faster as the summer goes on in terms of like financial modeling. Were you doing like mostly pitch work? It sounds like it was an actual deal. So
I was on a deal, but I didn't do much modeling at all during my internship. I think because it really depends. I think in the US, people are extremely keen because it's even more competitive. And some people I've heard, like, they know modeling when they start the internship. I didn't know how to use Excel. I mean, like, when I say I didn't know how to use Excel, I didn't know how to use Excel. Again, in continental Europe, a lot of the universities have Excel assignments during there's things you do some modeling actually as part of university. My university and the UK in general, it's really, really academic. I didn't have to show on a laptop, I'm pretty sure. So it was
more theory. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So it was a really big learning curve. And I actually didn't do that much modeling. I think I did a bit. So it was mainly pitch work and that sort of stuff.
did you know you were going to get the offer? Did you feel like I might not get it, or what was your thought process? Kind of did they give you like some feedback halfway through and then near the end, or was it a surprise, or were you like, oh, I have this, it's okay?
I think I'm like, I was born with imposter syndrome, so I feel like I never feel like, oh, like I got this, but like halfway, we had a halfway review, and only feedback, like negative feedback or like critical feedback, was more around soft skills rather than like you're not, that rather than hard skills. And I implemented what they told me, so I feel like
what were you doing with the soft skills that wasn't I
had it later in
you're too intense.
They were saying like sometimes like I look really pissed off, or like look really kind of like upset, or basically I'm not like hiding my emotions at all, and people sometimes feel like I'm not rude, but that was kind of but I think it's also cultural, like in Eastern Europe
it is cultural.
It's a really different mentality to say the US, where everyone's like, oh, nice and friendly, but then they talk badly about you behind your back. And from where I'm from, people are really direct, and also explain to them is like, I'm focusing, I want to do the job, I want to meet the deadlines, I don't want to like chit chat in the coffee room and stuff. But so they got that, and that was fine, but I did adjust it and try to become more likable. But
that's hilarious. It's so true. The cultural differences do, when you're in the UK or where you're in the US or whatnot, if you're coming from a country where people are more direct, or vice versa, it's not an easy adjustment for sure. So then, okay, so you ended up getting the full-time offer, obviously. And then, so then it was just like relax again for another whole year before you start, or like, and then tell me about that, like how you're approaching full-time and how that went.
So I started obviously the year after. For me, the biggest adjustment, you asked me what was hard. The internship wasn't hard, but you're still at uni, I climbed Kilimanjaro after my internship. So it's
awesome.
You have so much stuff to look forward to. But when training started in London, I think the first day, that's when reality hit me, because the whole day training was the whole summer, right? And the first day, it hit me like I'm in accounting, I'm in this setting now, accounting, finance, banking, and there's no expiration date. It's up to me now if I want to exit at some point, and that hit me actually pretty hard. But then went on to become extremely fun, because the group of people, normally training is in New York, but that one was done in London, and like the people are really fun, people from all over the world, like super diverse group. And I just had an amazing time, and we were out like, and that was your first money. We all got a £5,000 starting bonus, if you want to call it that. And for me, that was like, this is sick. Like, you can go to restaurants, pay like £100 a meal. Like, I thought this was amazing. And we would like have the training 9 to 5. Then we'd go home. Go to a sports class. Then we'd do dinner in like some fancy place. Then we'd go out until like 3-4 a.m. rinse, repeat. So it was really intense. We'd do fun stuff. And I remember I was like sick the whole summer, I think, because just like
going out.
Yeah, exactly. Going out all the time. Exactly.
So funny. And so then you basically get through training, and then suddenly the hours start ramping, I assume.
That's when real life hits.
And your mentor's gone at this point.
No, my mentor was there, luckily. My mentor was, but here was the catch. She was doing telecoms, and I wanted to do tech. And the issue was that because I wanted to do, I actually knew that I wanted to do either growth or venture capital or private equity, but something like tech investing. And so I started to think about it. I knew I had to do tech. And so, but the tech group within my group was actually quite underdeveloped. And because I actually did not go to the 3 bulge brackets, so Goldman, Morgan, and JP Morgan, I did not go to any of these 3 banks. It meant that we were doing like really crappy deals in tech. because our telecoms franchise was extremely strong, and so was our media. The head of the group was a media guy, and it was really strong, but the tech practice wasn't. I hope my boss from the time is not listening to this, but and that meant that it was a lot of pitching, a lot of RFPs that you didn't win, and a lot of stuff like that. And it meant that it was a lot of smaller deals, but that was a blessing and a curse too. So I can go into that later.
Well, yeah, tell me, what was the blessing? What was the curse of,
Well, I'll start with the curse. The curse was that, if you keep doing these like 300 million, 200 million private placements, sell side all the time. Sometimes, oftentimes they don't even get done. This was often companies in Turkey, Israel, e-commerce, gaming, like all these, these aren't necessarily the best deals. So the modeling is not as intense, the modeling is not as complicated. Sell-side materials in general are more pitchy than, buy side. But so that was not good in terms of hard skills, technical skills. But the blessing was that that's exactly the sort of how shall I say, that's exactly the sort of deals you should surround yourself with if you want to go into growth, because that's effectively what we were doing. We were pitching to the growth equity groups.
Megafund.
Funds. Yeah. These deals. So I saw, so this was a lot, when I started doing my job in growth, I already knew the main, metrics in internet, metrics in software that you would look at this stage. So that actually helped me hugely.
That's great. So you're kind of there for the first year. When did you start thinking, hey, I need to make this transition to growth equity?
So I knew banking was not for me. I am, I have ADHD basically, and what that means is, so I'm neuro-divergent, and what that means is I cannot focus on, I physically can't focus, I can't do a job that I don't literally love. It's like impossible. It's not, no amount of money, I genuinely just can't do the tasks. And I found banking, I love my tech deals, and I really loved the concept of it. I always felt like I would have been a really good MD, but it took everything out of me to work on these pitches and these sheets. It was really tough, and I was really, really passionate about growth, venture, basically buy side, and doing tech specifically. So I actually I knew from day one that it's not what I was going to do. And I started probably 6 months in. First 6 months is kind of the honeymoon period. 6 months in, I want to say, I started networking. I mean, headhunters also were reaching out to me very, very early. Yeah. There was a girl from our grad class who left 6 months in. She was the first one. But I was definitely, and they were reaching out for growth equity. And actually, I didn't have a good understanding at the time what that was exactly. Yeah. I just said, yes, I'm interested in growth. But actually, I was in my head thinking venture or private equity. I didn't realize growth existed, actually. And what I was doing is, at the time, I was focusing more on venture capital. And so I would meet, any spare minute I had, holiday days, all of that. I would network, I would fly to San Francisco and go to tech conferences, meet people from venture funds, companies. There was no company or small that I felt like I didn't need to meet them. Any networking contact, I would go on LinkedIn and message. I started actually with gaming not because I thought it was a good investment category, but that's kind of what I knew from work, right? So I would just email these gaming CEOs and media company CEOs, smaller companies, obviously, and try to meet them. I did that in LA. I did that in San Francisco. I went to Berlin, just volunteered in some of the conferences if I couldn't, make it happen otherwise. So I tried to basically, I just networked as much as possible. I was really, without even consciously thinking about it, I was doing you have to do the job before you have the job. So I was definitely doing that. Again, blessing and a curse. curse because, it does distract you from your day job. Sometimes, I had to obviously you have to juggle, you have to do your job, but then in like little breaks or whatever, you're like doing stuff on the side. So I don't necessarily recommend it. It's definitely a risk because you're going to appear not committed to your job, right? But then on the other hand, you can't blame a first or second year analyst to not be committed. It's kind of obvious that at some point most of them leave. So as long as you do the fine. But I just I put all of my eggs into that basket, and I just almost, I almost didn't even think, is this strategy going to work? It's not going to work, because actually getting into venture growth is really hard.
Yeah.
Really, really. Actually, I think harder than private equity at the time.
There are no seats.
There's no seats, and it's like, well, you come from banking, and you don't even come from a good bank. So, well, it's another, but so it was really hard actually.
So tell me about that. So you started looking pretty early. It sounds like you're pretty aggressive in terms of building your network, which is key. But you kept. Did you enter into a lot of processes that these recruiters were kind of throwing at you, like at other growth equity shops, or were you just like staying around in touch with people and then eventually like you got into some sort of process?
Yeah, that's more like it. I actually didn't do any in the first year, I don't think. Okay. I think I did one, maybe.
You did no processes the first year, you said?
No processes,
yeah, okay.
Yes. Second year, the second year was really like, right, I have to do this now, like this is serious. And I didn't do any processes still, but I actually, it's very interesting. I sometimes there was a thought. I also had a thought about joining a startup, because I thought that would help me, like a growth stage startup, because I thought that would help me get into venture growth officer. So again, I actually did do some, not really processes, but kind of like interviews at growth stage companies in fintech. And I'm so happy, like, that didn't work out. Sometimes they were like, well, you don't have the right experience, just have banking. Sometimes, because I really wanted to be in the US, they didn't want to sponsor me. But I'm so glad it didn't work out. But I'm so glad I did all those conversations, because that was just, really teaching me how to ask the right questions to a company.
What type of roles were you applying for at these startups?
I think business development is what I was thinking. I had no idea what I was doing, but I think business development, because that's the only one almost where you didn't need to have like a technical background.
Right. No, that's tough. It's tough. So you're kind of finding your way, it sounds like, in that second year. And then tell me how you eventually ended up at this Megafund growth equity shop.
Yeah. So I was actually I was really fed up with banking, and I signed So I was, again, spending all my free time doing these conversations, and I was also spending all my free time practicing the modeling side of things and all of that. And then I was in a process with a growth equity fund that I really wanted. I really liked the team, and there was a new fund. I was extremely excited. And at the end, they basically said something like, we need to wait. That's a bit of an excuse, I guess, but because they did hire a guy who later became my friend. But they basically said, we need to wait. And so they didn't give me the offer. And that was spring. And I just couldn't. I was like, no, this summer, I'm not going to do banking. And then I actually accepted an offer at a small fund that mainly did internet, and a lot of it actually was gaming. And I just got that from my contacts, because again, I was, really hustling in that industry. And that's what I accepted. And my thinking was, well, this is not my ultimate dream place, but from that I can go to like Excel growth or index growth. I'll kind of move up, or maybe do business school and change.
Yeah,
like that. So I accepted that offer, and I went on to travel yet again. I went to Cuba and Mexico and the Bay Area. Again, still networking. I'm always networking.
Vacation and business at the same time. Yeah, I get it.
That's me, classic me. And then I got, a month before I had to start, I got 3 funds reached out. One of them was Atomico. One of them was SoftBank Vision Fund, and the third was the one where I ended up working. And they all reached out a month before, and I thought, all right, I gotta fly back. I just have to see this out. I just have to see what happens. I had already prepped everything. So I flew back, I met all of them. And with the one where I ended up working, it just immediately, I don't know, like it really clicked with everybody. And some of those people have left, most actually haven't, but some, especially there's one guy who's quite senior. I felt like he really saw in me the qualities that maybe other funds wouldn't see. And I think that for me was really, like they really appreciated the hustle, the scrappiness, because that was kind of the team culture, which wasn't more so much about your pedigree and feeling entitled, but it was about hard work and etc.
Yeah.
And ambition and really the hustle. So the cultural fit was great. And so that was a really intense 2-week interview process. I had interviews every day, modeling, case study, all this stuff every single day. That was really, really, really intense. And I got the offer on Saturday, and I had to then call that previous firm and said, right, I'm not coming in on Monday, which
How did
was
that
really
go? How did that go?
It was fine. I think they knew that I was maybe not necessarily overqualified, but it kind of makes sense. It was fine. I no hurt feelings, I think. So it was all good. Uncomfortable conversation, but I knew in my heart that I just had to join this firm. Like it was very obvious.
And it's worked out. You've been there for a long time.
It has worked out. I think the culture is really, really great. And I would really just encourage anybody listening to kind of remind themselves that everyone always says it's about the people, and it sounds really cringe, but really it is about the people. Like this, either you do banking is different because you have an analyst, analyst in my case, right, class that you are close to them, but you're not. I wasn't close to my associates, VPs. It's so hierarchical, right? Like you're not gonna be friends with them, I think, in most cases. But in this case, I was the fourth person to, one, two, three, four, fourth or fifth, depending on how you count, to join the team. And I had 2 associates, I guess, a principal and a director in the team. So it was kind of like you have to get along with them because you're gonna spend so much time. We travel a lot, so the travel, the work, and it's just a lot of hours. Like even though it's not banking, it's not better than banking, it's still a lot of hours. I think the travel, especially.
Let's talk about more specifically hours. So what you averaged at your bulge bracket bank, and then kind of how that transitioned to your growth equity job at a Megafund. Was it similar? Was it like 80 hours a week on average at the bulge bracket, 90, and then did it drop to 70, or what was it like?
It's really hard to say. In the bank, it was probably like 100 hours or something. I mean, it was really intense. I want to say, it like during the week, it was probably like 2 to 3 a.m.s, and then you come back at like 9:30, 10, something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
And then Fridays, obviously, you can leave early, but so many Fridays where I was there at 10, 11. So still just, I had Friday, it was really bad. I had Fridays like 1 a.m. too. Then it really changed. I mean, my first year was my learning curve at the Megafund growth equity was really, really steep. And it was a lot of hours too on some deals. But the difference is that you aren't constantly pitching things to somebody. So the difference is that when there's a deal, you do work a lot. You don't do like 4 a.m. every day, but you do work a lot. You will have late nights. I think, let's say a deal which isn't like extremely rushed timeline, you could get away with maybe like 1 a.m. So, and for me, that's fine because then you get like 7 hours of sleep or so. There will always be one, we always used to say, like, there's always going to be one terrible week at the end. Like before you submit to the investment committee, there's always going to be an awful week. But max it's 1, 2, 3 weeks. I think that differs from private equity too. So the bad stretch is never that bad. And then the good stretch It's still not 9 to 5. I think it may be actually, if you really go to venture, the lifestyle's a lot better. We still work really hard. We were also a really small team at the time. And there was a lot of, kind of hustle culture, which resonated with me. So I was fine with it. But then it's maybe like 9 or 9:30 to say 8 or 9, and maybe you have dinner at 7, and then you go and work from home for a few hours. And Friday you can sometimes I'd leave at 5. It's like really, it's just so different because you are more in charge. And again, I really like this industry and I really like this job. So no one is forcing me to like log in on Sunday. Like no one's beating you with a stick, but I just kind of
banking is more like that, right? Banking, they're like overseeing everything. Yeah.
Doesn't work for me, but as I said, I need to work on things that I'm interested in. The good thing is that like in growth, of course, every job is going to have parts that are boring, like the admin stuff. But in this job, those parts are really small. And then you just do them out of respect for yourself and your team because it has to get done. But then the bulk of the work, I genuinely think is really, really interesting. And I genuinely think it's an extremely interesting job. Like even money and all that glamour aside, I mean, it's just such an interesting mix of, again, you can't say that necessarily venture or private equity. It's a mix of, modeling, and where I work, it's actually the analysis, the model and the operational analysis is really, really rigorous. And it's really the most work that anyone does in growth. So there's like real focus on fundamentals, which I think is great when you're earlier in your career. But then there's also the research part of the job where you look at which sectors are going to be relevant for us, today, tomorrow, and in a few years. Research different spaces, you own the spaces, in software, but spaces within those as well. Then there's obviously the sourcing piece, which I love because I was kind of already doing that without doing it right. There's the, people piece where you're constantly around extremely smart, kind of ambitious people, whether in your team or the entrepreneurs that you speak to or the VCs you speak to. So I just really think it's such a diverse job that, it really awesome. Interested. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love my time in private equity. You probably get to see a little bit more exciting stuff too, because it's a little bit earlier stage, which is
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I always actually good to start a bit later stage and then move earlier rather than starting from like, early. Yeah.
You mentioned the learning curve. I know we recently released a private equity deals process course, and we also have a venture capital course. And it's funny because when we approach growth equity shops, we sometimes like tell them you need both, because you need like the VC, like the cap table modeling, the ARR builds, the cohort analysis, all the like that technical stuff, and the term, not understanding term sheets really fast. But you also need to build like detailed underwriting models and more like the PE type stuff, and understand the deal process from like NDA through funds flow. So I'm like, do you feel like what you said, the learning curve was super steep? What was like the hardest part for you coming out of banking, going to like growth equity?
Well, for me, but I'm not a typical candidate. For me, actually, the analysis was the hardest because I had never had to like really critically think about, is this a good business? Because frankly, even if it was a bad business, we're still trying to sell it.
Right.
Like everybody knew, I knew, the MD knew, like, no, but no one cares.
Yeah, thinking like an investor, basically.
Right. But thinking like an investor in Excel, like do the analysis that's gonna then tell you, is this a good business or not? And you have to like really use your brain, and you have to. So that was a kind of and the first deal that we did was pretty, it's like just crazy. We had like I had never done a cohort model like that at all. And like in banking, we also, this is bad, like in my team in tech, we just used a lot of templates and a lot of like models pre-built. So honestly, sometimes you don't need to do that much. And here, I had this smallish growing internet company. We had like 10 years of historical monthly cohort data. So my boss wanted to build a monthly cohort model. I literally had it from like 2014 to like 2025, like monthly cohort model, like so many different product lines. It was big mess, like a big mess. And that was like that was the project where I hit a rock bottom, but then it was only up from there. And that was a really big learning curve. But I think when it gets better and you get a lot quicker and you get independent, it just becomes really interesting because you have a lot more freedom and you can really think more versus just crunching the numbers. You basically, you still need to crunch the numbers, but you can crunch the numbers and then you have some time over to think.
Tell me about pay. So how did it trend from banking to growth equity in terms of base bonus? You can give ranges. You don't have to give exact, but just, approximately.
Oh, I've forgotten the banking actually range, but I want to say that we were probably on like 60,000 pounds base. And I think bonus was like 100. I mean, it depends on yourself, right? But like it was up to, I think, 100%.
What did you get? Did you get 100%? That's a lot.
It depends. Yeah, it's a lot, but
because from what I understand, I guess those were good years. So maybe there were a lot of people who got paid 100%.
Oh, it was good. Those were good years, but actually, I just don't want to disclose
That's
the
fine.
name. But actually, my institution was doing very badly at the time, so we had a lot of like lawsuits and things like that. But it didn't affect the analysts as much. So yeah, a lot of money. And then, but it's a lot, obviously, more in growth equity. So when I started as an analyst. I didn't start as an associate. I started as I was paid. So the base was really low. The base was like 70,000 pounds. But I really don't remember what the bonus was like. But I think I got like as an analyst, not associate, 200K all in.
So 130K, 130,000 pounds as a bonus.
Yeah, something like that.
Did that hit in one check?
Maybe it was 200K, $200,000, not pounds. I think that was right.
Okay. So, but did that hit in like one check, like similar to banking bonus cycle?
Yeah. In one go, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then I assume that's significantly increased over the last several years, or no?
Yeah, it increases a lot, but I'm not going to give specifics.
That's fine. But that's fine. I always get screamed at if I don't ask by my listeners. They're like, you got to ask pay.
All I can say is if you go to a Megafund and do private equity or growth equity, like money, you're not going to worry about it. It's not going to be something that you really need to worry about. But I would just encourage people to, I guess, choose places where they like to work, because I wouldn't, even for me, like I really enjoy my day to day. I enjoy doing this work. I enjoy growing. And then the paycheck comes and you're like, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. I can afford things, or what I want to do with it. My fund I actually can't afford things because my fund, which is really great, they allow us to co-invest in our funds. So many people, including me, do that, which is bad for your, disposable. In the near term, but it's just great, right? I mean, money is supposed to be invested, right? So, so that's really, really cool. It's like an unparalleled opportunity, effectively, to be a private equity investor, like quite literally, right?
Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome. It's a huge benefit.
Yeah, it is.
Huge benefit. So tell me, did you get carry after your analyst years, or was it something where they want?
No, you do not get carry as an analyst or associate.
Do you feel like that's typically principal or VP or whatever they call it?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, it sounds like you're in a great seat. Do you expect any thoughts of like ever wanting to go VC or earlier stage, or thoughts like that, or you enjoy where you're at?
It's always really hard to, you never really know how a job is going to feel before you. So I'm very cognizant to think that the grass is greener, and then to then see that it actually isn't. I think whilst you are learning and growing and you work with good people and you get paid well, That's really rare, actually.
You should stay.
And well, I like it, which obviously I don't. I really like it. I mean, unless you have reasons, but I think once you stop growing, or you don't vibe with the people, or your interests don't lie there, you have to make a move. But I think that when it's time, and I don't think it's time for me.
You said one thing before we call the pod, before we end it. You had said something earlier that I wanted to bring back up. You said something about being neurodivergent or with ADHD.
Yeah.
In finance. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and what that's been like? I know, at least here in the US, I know it's been a diagnosis that's like skyrocketed, and there's a lot of like treatments. And I know kids in college, even for studying, they're taking stuff that don't have ADHD.
I don't take any medication. I mean, that's a longer story, but I think I wish I had been diagnosed, I guess, earlier in life, because I could have understood myself and my work patterns a lot better. And I think you need some adjustment. I mean, I'm very functional, but for example, and my team is extremely accommodating. I didn't even necessarily disclose my diagnosis. I just asked for these things. It's kind of, I get really overwhelmed. Working in open plan is actually very hard for me. It's really hard for me to focus. There's too much sensory stimulation. I really can't get stuff done.
Yeah.
And it was the same in banking. So I try to go, there's also offices. So I try to go in offices, or for me, really working from home works really well, because I can focus a lot better. So kind of mixing that with office work is obviously still the norm anyway. Or things like, I have a really delayed sleep cycle. So for me, initially my colleagues would sometimes say, I would come into work late, and they were gave me feedback on that. And then I explained that I don't have an issue working, doing calls at midnight, but I have a real issue doing calls at 8 a.m. And then they said, okay, fine. You just get here by 10 or 10:30. They were get here by 10. You don't need to, because most of the senior people go there early, because they want to be home for the family, right? Early.
Yeah.
They say, get here by 10. If we need you to be in early, we'll specifically say so. If not, just, get here by 10 and it's all good. And, or in general, oftentimes we have a meeting, say in Germany, and most of the colleagues, they have families, so they don't want to fly the night before. I prefer to fly the night before. It's my day's ruined if I have to get up at 5 a.m. And so just having flexibility, and you don't need to have you don't need to be neurodivergent, I think, to actually answer these things. We're all really different. And unfortunately, there's a lot of talk about diversity when it comes to gender and sexual identity, but there's zero focus in the industry on neurodiversity, which I think is just huge, because that is how you interact with the world, and how you think, and how you work, and what your patterns are. And,
Oh yeah, well, two out of my 3 children are neurodiverse, so I get it. Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask more about it. I was curious around how you were able to deal with it, and what you were specifically able to ask for. So that's great.
Yeah, but I think in general, employers are more and more accepting. Obviously, it's also a medical diagnosis, and I think it's really about understanding yourself and what works for you. And maybe there's obviously a professional can help you understand that, and then asking for what you need, because people with ADHD, there's also benefits. I can hyper focus on a topic like no other, but it's about understanding how you work and what you need. And then I think you can get, kind of a good outcome for everybody.
That's awesome. No, it's definitely interesting. The talk about diversity, and also hopefully there's not just focus on, there's diversity for neurodiverse people as well, because it's a huge percentage of the population.
Right.
So that's interesting. So yeah, anything else before we call it? Any other final thoughts? I think this has been really informative and an interesting one. I think the listeners will like it.
I hope so. No, just obviously reach out to me if anybody needs more specific advice. But I think
Are you part of our mentor network for people?
Yes.
So we'll link that here in the show notes.
I would just say, I didn't come from a standard background, and I'm not a standard candidate. And I ended up working at a really, really, one of basically the best private equity funds out there. So I don't want to say it's not that hard, but it's actually not that hard, but you have to be willing to put in the work consistently, and 99.9% of people in the world do not do that. And that's why they don't get there.
Yeah, agreed on that. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a lot of fun having a chat with you.
Nice chatting. I talk to you later.
And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, Patrick at wallstreetoasis.com. Until next time.